and ready. So I'd like to welcome you all, and I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Gadigal land and pay my respects to the elders both past and present, and also acknowledge present Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who live here in our city together with people of 200 nationalities. So it's the 11th anniversary of the Green Cities, and the theme this year is Fast Forward to the Future, and of course that's very timely. At the C40 meeting in Mexico City last year, C40 delivered a new report, Deadline 2020, which outlined what cities can and must do to implement the Paris Agreement. The report made clear that to have a reasonable chance of meeting the Paris Agreement, let alone the deeper cuts we need, the world must start to bend the curve of greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. As C40 Executive Director Mark Watts said, we need to do twice as much in half the time. This is the cost of the inaction of our political leaders, and it's easy to feel depressed watching their antics. Following the breakthrough Paris Agreement, Donald Trump said before he was elected that he'd pull the US out of the agreement, and we've heard the reports that he's tasked his staff to do just that now that he's president. In our own federal parliament, we've witnessed the grotesque spectacle of Conservative politicians fondling a lump of coal, whilst Australia experienced its hottest ever summer, and our energy grid was pushed to its limits and beyond by storms and heat waves. But despite their shameful inaction, fundamental change is occurring in markets, technology and institutions. We are approaching the tipping point when renewable energy is cheaper than coal and gas power. There are $5 billion worth of large-scale renewable energy projects under construction in Australia, while rooftop solar has been cheaper than grid power for some time. Solar and wind farms have finalised power purchase agreements at prices lower than the future price of wholesale electricity, which is a huge step forward. We've seen the first Australian commercial power purchase agreement made directly between a solar farm and business, and based on the US experience, we hope the new sector will grow quickly. And recently, we saw the incredible coalition of business groups, owners of coal plants and aluminium smelters, joining the renewable sector, environmentalists, unions, welfare and consumer groups to implore the federal government to act on climate change so that much needed investment in our energy sector could proceed. While we urgently need national leadership, as we've seen in many other nations, it's in the city and state governments, business and community that are taking the lead. Most of our state governments have substantial climate and renewable energy targets and policies, and a roundtable was recently formed to improve collaboration between state and city governments on climate change. In New South Wales, both the City of Sydney and the New South Wales Government have net zero emission targets for 2050, and the city's Energy Efficiency Master Plan and the New South Wales Government's Draft Energy Savings Plan provide many opportunities to collaborate to save power and money for our residents and businesses. Sydney, Adelaide and Melbourne all have net zero targets or plans for their local government areas, and Brisbane's citywide local government has just become carbon neutral in its operations. The C40 Deadline 2020 report found cities can deliver 40% of the emissions reductions needed to achieve the Paris Agreement. So we're getting on with it. At the City of Sydney, we've been carbon neutral since 2007. We were the first council to be certified carbon neutral in 2011. We have driven greenhouse gas emissions down by 26% in our own operations and citywide emissions by 19%, at a time when the local economy expanded by 37%. When I came back from the C40 meeting in Mexico, I asked Council to authorise accelerating funding and implementation of our Environmental Action 2016-2021. Our target for our local government area is to achieve 70% reduction in emissions and to source 50% of our electricity from renewables by 2030. Our 2016-2021 action builds on our suite of environmental strategies, and it commits to strong actions on water, energy, climate adaptation, waste, transport and greening for the next 5 years. And much of our emissions reductions have been achieved through collaborative action. Under the Better Buildings Partnership, the owners of over half the commercial office space in the city centre committed to also reducing their greenhouse gas emissions by 70% by 2030. They've already achieved a 47% reduction and are saving themselves $36 million a year. Our City Switch program, which received the C40 Global Buildings Energy Efficiency Award together with Melbourne, is helping office tenants reduce their emissions and reap the financial benefits. As a national program, it now covers 14% of all Australia's central city office space and allowed business last year to save $14.9 million through energy efficiency and other sustainability initiatives. Last year, a further 20 apartment buildings enrolled in our Smart Green Apartment program, which helps owners improve environmental performance in their buildings. And we're working with the New South Wales Government to develop a neighbours tool for residential apartments, which we hope can drive change in the same way as it has in the commercial office sector. These partnerships reflect our belief that the most reliable way to achieve emissions cuts and resource efficiencies is through collaboration with the private sector and with the community. We are now also developing plans for accommodation, entertainment and commercial office sectors. And there will be a $10 million renewable energy fund to accelerate uptake in our local area. We've also been selected to participate in the City Solutions Platform. This is an international initiative that allows us access to experts who will help scale up our use of renewable energy. And last year, we updated the Central Sydney planning controls to include requirements that new commercial buildings obtain higher neighbours ratings and new residential buildings will have access to additional floor space, only if they go beyond basics. We want to lift the minimum standards and encourage innovation for the next generation of net zero buildings. And we want to attract Australia's early net zero buildings to Sydney. We received a grant from the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance to commission research on the technical and economic interventions required to accelerate net zero high-rise residential buildings. And we're developing plans for a net zero emission buildings competition to set a new benchmark for leading designers, architects and developers. Our research shows that net zero new buildings can be delivered with high energy efficiency measures and photovoltaic facades. This is a really exciting development and one that we're keen to share with you. So make sure you register for our masterclass on accelerating net zero in apartment buildings, which will be held on the last day of this conference. So in conclusion, I want to say that I hope this conference will leave you inspired and energised and ready to push through action that we so desperately need. I want to urge you not to wait for our political leaders to catch up. I want to urge you to campaign, to make a noise, to create change and fast forward to the future we'd like to leave our children and grandchildren. Thank you.